Soufriere FM, sharing your experience, information, education, entertainment, news, instructions, advice on diabetes, high blood pressure, strokes, menopause, AIDS, pregnancy, sex.
Sex? Did you say sex?
As prescribed, take your medication, exercise, and diet. On 88.5 Soufriere FM, tell a friend, call your neighbor. Casualty 911 is on.
And of course, this is why we say good morning to you. Welcome inside another edition of Casualty 911 inside this beautiful Monday, the 4th of March. Wow. What Monday? Well, in my part of the island, it's wet. All right. I hope all of you guys woke up feeling great, ready to take on the day. Okay. Again, if it's a Monday between the hours of 10 and 11, Casualty 911. With me this morning is Fawn along with her guest. All right. Hey, welcome inside another edition, Fawn. Bonjour.
Morning, Earl, and thank you so much. And thank you to Romanus for getting us all set up with our virtual guest this morning as well. Welcome to our regular listeners, our new listeners. It's going to be a very good show today. We have two guests in the form of a nutritionist and a physician. But before I introduce my guest, I would just like to share a little information with the public. Yesterday was World Herring Day. So raising awareness about the heirs and hearing loss. The theme was changing mindsets. Let's make air and hearing care a reality for all. Now, there are a lot of things that we believe about the heirs and hearing. And I was very happy to see that breakdown of the myths versus the reality as it comes to heirs. And I know one for sure really, it really stuck on me. There's one that says airwax. Myth or reality? The airwax needs to be cleaned. That is a myth. That means the airs are self-cleaning. The reality is the airs are self-cleaning. So here what it is. No pas besoin cotton buds. No pas besoin plume. No pas besoin zéping chivé. We don't need to be putting anything inside of there to try to clean out the airwax. Because the myth is that cotton buds are good for the ears, and the reality is that they are not good for the ears. I would like to thank the team who works with hearing all at our clinics, our hearing clinics, our audiology clinics for helping to put that together. The other myth is that ear pain should be treated at home with our home remedies, and they are encouraging us to seek medical intervention. Go to a professional, let the professionals have a look at it. And I've never heard of discharge from the ears per se. Have you heard about discharge from the ears? Discharge from the ears. The myth is that it is a small inconvenience, it does not matter, and the reality is it's actually an urgent problem. I would imagine that if I saw something running out of my ears, I would think that I probably need to see a doctor. So these are just a few little things that we need to remember as it relates to our ears and hearing. The other thing is that noise-induced hearing can be prevented. So we like the loud music. We like to be standing as close as possible to the boombox so we can feel it. Those people are putting themselves at risk of hearing loss, and hearing loss which is preventable and also permanent. So let us try to use some safe listening tips, practices, lower the volume, take it down a notch. We don't need the television at the highest for us to hear if we're sitting right there. We don't need the music to be so very loud. Turn it down. And if necessary, by all means, use your earplugs so that you are not exposed to all of that loud noise for long periods of time. So these are a few tips for hearing, for our ears, to protect our ears. Remember, it's all about being healthy. Now, Our today, I was just saying to my colleague, there are quite a few observances in March. Yesterday was World Herring Day. Today is World Obesity Day, the 4th of March. And today we will be speaking about obesity. I have with me Mrs. Fabia Campbell, who is our nutritionist here. And we also have with us Dr. Jenny Isaac Louisy, who is a district medical officer. They will both introduce themselves in a short while. And I will just start off with the theme for this year, which is let's talk about obesity. And so they will be providing the and today. Let's talk about obesity and the reason for speaking about obesity is really to raise awareness. We see ourselves, we look around, we see people of all different sizes, and sometimes we have to stop and think, is there any risk? Are there any risks involved in being, as we say, a little overweight? Or I'm sure Mrs. Campbell will deal with that one, being big boned, having a little extra size. What's wrong with that? It looks good. I feel good. So what's wrong with that? We will deal with all of those things. Now, in terms of our situation here in St. Lucia recently, we got the results of a survey that was done, the 2019-2020 Pan American Health Organization, World Health Organization Stepwise Approach to Non-Communicable Disease Surveillance Survey, otherwise known as STEPS. And I'm very happy that we have a little acronym, something shorter to say. So I will refer to it, and I'm sure my guests will be referring to it as well during the discussion. The STEP survey, which looks at our risk factors for chronic and non-communicable diseases. So right away, you can see there probably are some risks associated with being overweight and obese, and it has to do in part with chronic non-communicable diseases. In St. Lucia, it was found that 65% of respondents were overweight or obese. Obese, 34.9%. Overweight men, 50%. Overweight women, 76.8%. That's quite a bit. 100 is the complete. We're at 75. So that's what, if we were given scores like at school, that would be a very good score, but that's not what we're looking for. Insufficient physical activity, people not being active enough, 17.1%. And then I am sure Mrs. Campbell will go into those who eat the correct amount, the correct portions of fruits and vegetables and all of that when she speaks about our obesity and overweight and the risks involved. So first off, let us introduce our guest. Mrs. Fabia Campbell will say a bit about herself, and then we would like Dr. Jenny Isaac to give a short introduction, and I will start off with a basic question to get the ball rolling, and they will take it from there.
Thank you very much, Fawn. Good morning to everyone. Thank you, Ilan. It's a pleasure to be back on the program again. My name is Fabia Campbell. As Fawn alluded to, I am a nutritionist by profession, working within the Ministry of Health, Wellness, and Elderly Affairs. I am based in Region 5, which is a region that encompasses Labrie, Vieux-Fort, and so on. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So Dr. Isaac.
Good morning, Fawn. Good morning, Fabia. Hi, Erlan.
Morning.
Pleasure to be joining you. I'm a bit jealous, though, that I'm not in Soufriere with the rest of you. I really love the area. So I'm really looking forward to an interactive discussion with the team this morning.
Wonderful. Welcome to both of you. So we will start off with I'm so not used to saying Mrs. Campbell, so I will be saying Fadia.
That is
So
fine.
we will start off with Fadia. Fadia is going to explain for us. I mentioned overweight and I mentioned obesity. And sometimes we like to think that we can just look at people and decide where they fall along that spectrum. So Fadia is actually going to give us a definition of what overweight is, what obesity is, how how they come to a conclusion as to whether a child is obese or whether an adult is obese, and what the differences are in determining child obesity and adult obesity or overweight.
In determining overweight and obesity, there is a parameter that is used, which we call BMI. It is an acronym for Body Mass Index, right? And that is a measurement of a person's leanness or corpulence, meaning the state of being fat, based on their height and their weight. And it is intended to quantify muscle mass. So it is widely used as a general indicator of whether a person has a healthy body weight for their height. It is calculated by dividing a person's weight in kilograms by the square of their height in meters. So specifically, the value obtained from the calculation of the BMI or the body mass index is used to categorize whether a person is underweight, normal weight, overweight, or obese, depending on what range the value falls between. So these ranges of BMI vary based on factors, even somebody's region or their age, and that it's sometimes it's subdivided into whether somebody is severely underweight or somebody is morbidly obese. So basically, this is the parameter that is used in order to define whether the person is healthy weight, overweight, underweight, etc.
So for our listeners, when we think about it, we like to compare weight. So you'll see me with my short self, and probably I say I'm 150 pounds, and somebody else is 150 pounds but taller. So that person who is 150 pounds and taller may not fall into the category of overweight, but me with my short little self at 150 pounds, when you compare my weight to my height, I might fall into the category of obesity. So let us learn to use those things. When you look online, it sounds a little complicated. Maybe you don't know your height. For those of you who have gone to the health fairs and gone to the health centers and so on, you may have been exposed to that. For those of you who have not, and probably you have no intention of going, a good starting point would be that if you know your height and you know your weight, you can go online and search for a BMI calculator. Put in the values, and then it will give you a number and an explanation as to where you are along the spectrum. And I'm sure Fadia can give us a little indication of what number range is used for underweight, normal weight, overweight, and obesity, just to give us the range.
Yes, okay. So before I move into the range, let me just define how children are categorized according to body mass index, right? So for children, BMI is age and sex specific because their body composition, it naturally changes as they age, right? So healthcare providers, they use the specific charts to assess a healthy BMI for children. And we have what we call the CDC growth chart. So when parents take the children into the health facility, the nurse is going to assess that child in terms of measuring their length, their weight as well, and that is plotted against a graph. So it is both age specific and gender specific. So we have the color blue for boys and pink for the girls. So these are parameters that I use in order to indicate whether the child is underweight, normal weight, and so on. However, too, there is what we call the I spoke to it a while ago, the CDC growth charts. That is from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. They have developed those growth charts that is age specific, like I said. And the BMI for age percentile curves I use to monitor the growth of children.
So this one is a little more complicated than the adult.
So
would that
yes.
require a parent to take the child into a professional?
Yes, most definitely into the health facility. They would use the child health passport or card in order to do that for the children. So
when we talk about children, just before you go on, when we talk about children, at what age do we end? What's the range from 0 to what age?
Okay, so for this CDC growth chart, it looks at children from 2 to 19 years. 2 to 19 years. Right? So this is what it is. But in terms of they used to have this other health card. I don't know if you remember them, but it wasn't capturing the what needed to be captured in terms of monitoring the children's growth and development. So they had to reorganize it and develop that growth chart. But however, I just want to go into explaining the BMI category for children as it relates to the percentile. So if your child falls under the 5th percentile, that is an indication the child is underweight. A percentile that is 5 percentile to less than 85, that means your child is within the healthy weight category. And the 85th percentile to less than 90, the 95th percentile means that this child is overweight. And of course, obesity starts at the 95th percentile. So this growth chart, it captures all of that as the child's weight and specific to their age and so on is being monitored.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. So we are going to look now at some of the causes of obesity and overweight. How do we end up being overweight and obese? So Dr. Isaac, if you could speak a little to this.
Okay. When we are looking at overweight and obesity, in our culture, in our society, you see somebody who is heavy, voluptuous, full, and automatically people just think it's a simple issue of you eating too much or you lazy. But it's good that we get the opportunity to actually explain to people that obesity and overweight is dependent on many, many factors. Basic explanation is that there is an imbalance of the energy you put in compared to the energy you put out, which means the amount of energy that you're taking in your food is much more than the amount of energy that you are burning through physical activity. So you would find an example, the athletes, let's take Julian Alfred, for instance. We can probably imagine Julian Alfred is taking in a lot of calories, and simply the word that we use to explain what an amount of energy that you get in an amount of food. So she takes in a lot of calories, but you can also imagine that she is doing a lot of physical activity and a lot of training. If I were to decide that I'm going to follow Julian Alfred's extremely healthy diet for her, but I'm sitting behind a desk all day and I don't exercise at all, I will end up obese. So the diet is not a bad diet if the person is putting out the amount of energy that they're taking in, and then you wouldn't have any weight gain. But apart from that, you also have environmental factors which affect our weight. So when I say environment, so you live in a place where you're not comfortable to go walking on an evening beat because of crime or vehicle collisions. So you would find yourself in a situation that you are aware that you should probably exercise because of the amount that you've eaten, but because of the setup around you, you find yourself not doing it. Also, the availability of what we know to be healthier foods, like our whole foods. I know Fadia will speak on that as well. Consuming whole foods. When we eat the provisions and we eat the fruits as a whole fruit, and we eat real food, real fruits and vegetables, our body, when it breaks it down, actually uses more energy to break it down and to use it. And so it's better for our metabolism when we eat whole foods. When we eat the dashing and we eat the coconut as a coconut and we eat the breadfruit. Then we also have our social factors where it's 12 o'clock, so we're eating. We're not hungry. We have excess energy left over from breakfast, but still, because it's lunchtime, we gather together with each other and we eat at a particular time. And our culture plays a role as well, because what we eat for lunch would be heavily dependent on our culture. So we may find ourselves eating a very carbohydrate heavy meal, maybe not have any protein, very little vegetables. So these things are social factors that would determine the value of the energy that our body is taking in. And those things do affect whether or not you become obese or overweight. And then finally, you have other factors like genetic factors. Some people have genetic conditions that they are born with that prevents their body from breaking down the food in a way that it is used, and so it is being stored as extra fat. You have certain medical conditions. There are certain medications that you can take that can actually favor weight gain. If you have injury, for instance, some people who used to walk a lot, they had an injury, an ankle sprain or something, they stop exercising, they start putting on weight. So obesity is not a single factor. It's not because of laziness. And whenever we have individuals who are overweight and obese and they are willing to do something about it, we should take the time to sit down and figure out why the person has this situation on hand.
Okay, thank you. So you mentioned a bit about the food that we eat. So I will go to Fabia right now. And in as much as you spoke about the energy in and energy out sort of equation, there's also the fact that we like to label our foods as healthy and unhealthy. So in the event that we have the healthy foods, and I think you mentioned some of that, Dr. Isaac, we have healthy foods, the whole foods. Is it possible to have too much of them? And what is there any value in placing foods into healthy and unhealthy if it's simply a matter of
Yes.
energy in, energy out?
Yes, definitely. That's a very good question, Fawn. Because in as much as the food may be healthy, not forgetting that there are a specific number of calories, like Dr. Isaac alluded to, that an individual is supposed to have in a day, right? And yes, the food might be healthy, but we still have to follow the amount, the serving sizes, the recommended amount for an individual. And also too, the factors Dr. Isaac spoke about. So if you are very sedentary, there is a specific number of calories for you. And she gave a very good example with our athlete, Julian. She is highly active, so her body would require that sort of excess calories because she's really burning it out. And also, even the unhealthy food, we also have to highlight a lot of the processed foods can contribute to overweight and obesity. Foods that are high in sugar, especially the simple sugars like sodas and cakes and chocolates, and all of these foods can contribute to overweight and obesity. And I like the fact that Dr. Isaac spoke about the whole foods. So it is so much better to choose foods that are wholesome, that are, you can actually eat the food. It is more from a plant source than processed and packaged and canned. That can be, a risk factor to the development of overweight and obesity. So we need our population to eat foods that are healthy, like our fruits, fresh fruits and vegetables, our peas and beans and grains, etc. But being reminded that we still have to follow the portions, the amount that is required for us within a day's activity.
I think it would be very surprising. Some people would find it very surprising when you talk about portions. If we think about a regular meal that you would buy at lunchtime, for example, you may have chow mein, rice, a few slices of ground provision, maybe a small portion of vegetables, some peas, and some meat. Would you say that it is well balanced? Is there anything there that you would not consider healthy and whole
Okay.
in that typical plate that we would buy
Yes.
at lunchtime?
Yes. So the typical plate that we have in our St. Lucian context, you would realize that, and you spoke about them, a lot of carbohydrate foods. So there's macaroni and cheese, there's chow mein, ground provisions, sometimes rice. So all of these are foods that are out of the staples grouping, and they contain carbohydrates. And you would find a limited amount of vegetables. So it's just like a garnish. But in order for us to have balance with this typical plate, the vegetables would need to be more. And to give you a visual representation, I always like to use the plate method. So let's say you have your plate, at least, 1/4 of that plate should have vegetables, whether steamed or raw. The other part of the plate, another quarter of the plate, you have your peas or your beans. And you have your animal protein, whether it be the chicken or the fish. And the other quarter, you have your carbohydrate. That would be a few slices of provision, maybe about a serving size spoon of rice if you so. But an individual does not need all this carbohydrate right there lumped in one plate. So we have to speak about balanced nutrition when we're speaking about obesity as well.
And culturally, I think we know that if you were to give somebody a plate like that, I don't want to dwell on that too much. They might tell you my belly not full. So what's the response to that? Because we eat to feel filled. We want to feel that the belly full. Yeah, man, I good.
Yes, but this is our cultural context, not even just in St. Lucia, within the Caribbean region, that unless there was this Trinidadian who said it is better that belly burst than good food waste. Yes. And this should not be, because your body needs specific nutrients, and it is not based on how full you feel, but the quality of the nutrients that your body needs for proper functioning. So this also can mean that persons would have expanded their stomach. So when they speak about they're not being filled, meaning that you can actually stretch your stomach, and going back to the balance of the meals would not make you feel full. However, this can, you're not feeling satisfied. So in as much as the stomach can be expanded or stretched, we can also shrink our stomach by beginning to eat less food. And that can happen over time. So every day somebody can set themselves goals to eat less of the provisions and the other foods that may tend to cause bulk, and try to include more vegetables and fruits and peas into the diet.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Very good. So, Dr. Isaac, we've spoken a bit about overweight and obesity culturally, how we behave as it relates to food. We also know that generally there are quite a few people, as Fadia said, who have a sedentary lifestyle. That means we don't move as much as we should. Are there any could you speak a bit about the health risks associated with overweight and obesity in the short term and in the long term? Because sometimes there may be people may be experiencing certain symptoms, noticing certain things about themselves, and they may not associate it with overweight or obesity.
Okay. When we look at the risks of obesity and overweight, I like to start where it's impactful and then bring it back, explain why. We have research that actually points out that every year we have 5 million people dying because of chronic diseases that are linked to overweight and obesity. And we're talking about heart attack and stroke, cancer, psychological, neurological problems, breathing problems, eating disorders, diabetes. All of those things are the result of overweight and obesity. And that's not just for grown-ups. We are seeing it in children as well, in childhood and adolescence, where children are developing heart problems and diabetes because of overweight and obesity. And for the policy level people and our ministers who are listening to the show, we have estimated US $3 trillion worth related to overweight and obesity costs globally for them over the next 6 years. By 2030, it is estimated that we would need to use US $3 trillion to deal with overweight and obesity. So it does not only impact the individual, but it also impacts the country and the finances and economics of the country. Now, for me to be able to answer Fawn's question, I want to just look at what fat is to start off. Because I think we need to understand that fat in itself is actually an organ. And if you have an enlarged heart, you know you have a problem. If you have a brain that is too big, you know you have a problem. If your liver starts to swell, you know you have a problem. So if you have too much fat tissue, what we call the adipose tissue, then too much of that tissue will become a problem. And it actually works as an organ that communicates a lot with your endocrine system. That is the system that has everything to do with your hormones. And we will talk a little more on that. Your hormones are special chemicals that tell your body what should happen, what it's supposed to do. It interacts with your nervous system, as I mentioned a while ago, your immune system. And so when you have patients with obesity and overweight, they tend to have chronic inflammation. And then it interferes with your metabolism. So fat, what does fat do for the body? And if we know what it does for the body, then we can understand the short-term and long-term effects of overweight and obesity. Everybody knows fat is for storage of energy and release for when you need it and to keep us warm, so insulation. It also helps protect the organs, so it's for cushioning. And it also helps regulate or help control, tell your body and your brain when you're hungry and when you're not hungry. But it also helps your body in the regulation or the balance of blood sugar and blood cholesterol. So if you have too much fatty tissue, which means you're overweight or obese, then how well your body balances blood sugar and blood cholesterol, it will be off. So you're going to have problems. It also affects how well your body responds to insulin. So it leads to something that we call insulin resistance. And so your body has insulin that it doesn't want to talk to, basically. And if insulin resistance is not dealt with, then it can lead to further problems with that sugar in the blood imbalance and lead to diabetes in the long term. It also contributes significantly to our immunity, how well we respond to viral infections, the cough, the cold. Somebody pass by you and they sneeze, whether or not your body can actually respond to that and actually defend and protect you, it affects that. And it also has a lot to do with our sex hormones. So there we would see how when we look at patients who are overweight and obese, how it affects their fertility, their sexual function, the different aspects of our lives that actually have to do with our sex hormones. You would find people having a lot of difficulty during menopause because of overweight and obesity. And I don't want that, now that we've said the different consequences or the different results of overweight and obesity, for you to decide for the next 5 days, I'm not eating anything, and you starve yourself. That's the wrong way to go about it, because we need to realize the fatty tissue is actually there for a reason. We need an amount of fatty tissue for us to survive and function well. So if you are overweight or obese, or you think you might be, you go to the health center, you go to your doctor, get the assessment done, to find out how much body fat you actually have, so that you can know what risks you exposed to. Sit down with our nutritionist so that you can get a proper plan to slowly reduce the amount of food that you're intaking, to try to reduce, and if it is an overeating, okay, and to help shrink that stomach slowly over time, to reduce your risk of developing high blood pressure and diabetes and liver problems. We have some patients who have difficulty sleeping and snoring, which is also related to overweight and obesity. So it's, although people don't think of fat as something that's important, fat affects every aspect of our body. We have fat inside of our eyeballs, right? So that is how much fat is everywhere, and it plays a role in every part of our lives. And so we need to respect the organ and deal with overweight and obesity accordingly in a healthy manner.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Isaac. So I have a question here that I would like both of you to tackle. There, and you mentioned it briefly, Dr. Isaac. When we talk about child obesity, you find that culturally we tend to say that the child will grow out of it. And the other thing I would like both of you to tackle is the idea that, okay, I'm just big boned, or I'm comfortable like this. So why can't I just continue my life as it is? So that is for adults. And the first one relates to children. And you may find that there will not be a lot of buy-in terms of parents and guardians, because they figure that the child will just naturally grow out of it.
Okay.
So who wants to go first?
Okay.
Fabia can go ahead.
I can go ahead. Okay. So in most children, when we say after a chubby start to life, right, their BMI falls during the preschool years, bottoming around, age 5 to 6 years. So from that point on, it is usual for BMI to climb steeply, leveling out in the late teen years to early adulthood. So yes, children can grow and do grow out of overweight or obesity. However, let me hasten to say that obesity isn't just about, eating too much and moving too little. And like Dr. Isaac nicely put it, it can be a very complex medical condition, and there are many other factors that may be involved, and she alluded to them, like the behavior, the genetics, the environment. As a matter of fact, we have what we call obesogenic environment, meaning our very homes can be an environment that facilitates obesity. Even within our pantry, what is there? What do we offer the children? Right? The school can be an obesogenic environment, an environment that facilitates overweight and obesity based on the quality of food that is being served, the quality of food that is available within that environment. All right. So there are certain factors, like I said, that and habits that can determine whether a child will outgrow obesity. Yes, and of course there are many studies to confirm that. But definitely, when we see that child is overweight and obese, that should be a red flag that that child needs some sort of intervention, nutritionally and so on. Yeah, so that is my take on
Dr.
this.
Isaac, would you like to add anything to this?
To the obesogenic environments, we used to have a lot of these monkey bars and tires on the schoolyard where the children used to go out and play and were encouraged to run around on the break and lunchtime. And I don't know if it is across the board. I cannot speak about my daughter's teacher. I find my children still run around a lot. But I've heard many parents complaining that the children are encouraged to stay in at lunchtime. I think during COVID, the online learning, the children didn't run around at break or lunch or anything like that. When they went back into the school ground, they kind of developed a habit of staying on the devices, even in the school at break and lunch, because they use the Google Classroom a lot. So we are tending to an obesogenic environment in St. Lucia as well. You look around and you look for parks and playgrounds for the kids and stuff. And these sorts of things are not anything that we can change on our own. It's over time, and if policy changes and stuff, these things will come. But yes, we need to be aware of the obesogenic environments. Now, I like to touch on the big boned. Okay, if you don't mind.
Go right. Feel free.
So we have, in our families, we have big people, and whenever you speak to them and tell them, you probably should check on your weight. You're talking to an 18, 19-year-old, 25-year-old, and they have no problem with their knees yet. They're fine. When they do their blood tests, they tell you, my blood tests were fine. The doctor told me my results were good. But we have to remember that the fatty tissue is an organ, and there is an amount of fatty tissue that is healthy, which is 10% to 35%. You cannot look at yourself in the mirror. You cannot look at anybody and say how much fat the person has. You actually need to do a special test that the nutritionists offer, some doctors offer. It's not something that's very invasive or painful, because it's standing on a fancy scale that I cannot explain to you how it works. I can drive the car, I don't know how the engine working, okay? But there are other methods like the DEXA scan, and there are B-pods and different more expensive ways to check it. But in St. Lucia, you can actually get your body fat levels and the amount of fat you have your organ to get to know what those levels are, to know whether or not your fat content is too much. Now, if your fat content is too much, we go right back to the list of things I was talking about a while ago, the risks. So let us say we have a 15-year-old young lady who is, she's not fat, but when she did her assessment, she was 40% body fat, which is too much. In our eyes, she looks good. She has a little curves and no problem. The 40% body fat means now she's going to develop insulin resistance. Your body needs to respond to insulin so that your ovaries can work properly. So the poor child is going to start having period problems. Her mother doesn't know what to do with the child and her periods. She's just a little round. It's not an issue. The child has this black line around her neck, no matter how much rag and fur and whatever it is, they try and scrub the child's neck is dark. These are little signs of insulin resistance. And these things actually lead to further problems like the high blood pressure and the diabetes, because there is an immune activity. The fatty tissue has immune activity or activity within the immune system. You find that people who are overweight and heavy and obese for long periods of times will start developing problems with their knees and the ankle. It's not just the weight. It is actually the weight plus the inflammation. So you would have somebody who's a bodybuilder who's 300 pounds of muscle and they don't have any problems. But you have somebody who is obese with too much body fat at 250 pounds who has any problems. So it's not just the amount of weight, it is the fat content.
Okay, so
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Isaac. And I think Fadi is going to add a bit to that.
Yes, if I may weigh in on this question as well. Being big boned is a myth. And if somebody really thinks that they're big bone, they can come into the health facility. We have what we call a BIA scale that actually measures an individual's body fat. It actually measures the muscle mass. It actually measures what we call the visceral fat. That is the fat that is embedded in the abdomen that cushions some of the vital organs. So this person can come in if you really think you're big boned or muscular, whatever the case may be. We can assess you and to tell you where you fall out, how much body fat, the percentage of body fat that you have, muscle mass, etc. And like Dr. Isaac said, there are other body analyzers that gives it specific to different regions of your body that specifically tells you how much fat you have in different regions of the body. All right. And even before we close the program, I don't think we had gone into
We're not closing yet. We're going to just a couple more things.
Yes. So then
I know you're looking at the time. It's okay.
Yes, I just wanted to touch on the range, the category as it relates to the classification of adult body mass index.
Okay.
So if an individual is 18.5, so when we do the measure, we calculate your weight in relation to the height, which is the BMI or the body mass index. If you fall at 18.5 or less, so that is to say you're underweight. A BMI of 18.5 to 25 is within the healthy range. 25 to 30 is overweight, and over 30 is obesity. And there are the classes of obesity, class 1, class 2, etc. But let me also say that BMI, it is widely used, right, as an indicator of healthy body weight. It does have limitations, right? Exactly. And I think Dr. Isaac addressed that. So a very muscular person, a bodybuilder, may have a high BMI, but high BMI in terms of muscle mass. So BMI, it does not directly measure body fat per se. So that is
important to do the
other, yes, so that you have the other measurements. So it puts you at, so that's why the BIA scale would categorize, would tell you how much percent of muscle mass you have, how much body fat, etc.
Wonderful.
Yes.
And as Fadia indicated, and Dr. Isaac as well, that is available at our health centers.
Yes.
You know, we have a lot of services available at the health centers around the island. Call your closest health center, arrange to go in, make an appointment so that we can get the ball rolling, which will lead me to my next question. which is what really can we do? What steps can we take individually and otherwise? I think Dr. Isaac, you're in a good position to talk about the otherwise. What steps can be taken to reduce obesity? And Dr. Isaac, I would also like you to look at to speak a bit about whether any of the effects of obesity and overweight can be reversed if we get into that normal range of body fat, that normal BMI, and so on. So,
Okay.
Fabia, would you like to start in terms of what can be done
Yes, sure.
individually?
Definitely. Right. So healthy eating is a key to good health as well as maintaining a healthy weight. So what to eat? What do we eat? So we want to choose foods that are minimally processed or ultra processed. And we want to eat whole foods like your whole grain, breads, cereals, and so on, your nuts, your seeds, your grains, fruits, vegetables. That should be part of a healthy diet. The vegetables, the colorful ones, and the others must be part of a healthy and balanced diet. Our fruits, instead of the fruit juices that may be laden with a lot of sugar, you want to eat the whole fruit, right? Instead of juicing it and adding sugar that can predispose you to overweight and obesity. So like I said, our nuts, our grains, our seeds, our lean meats, our fish, our poultry, other meats that are lean, right? Trying to cut back on all the fat and so on, right? You want to use healthy oils like coconut oil and olive oil as, part, but of course you have to be using them in moderation, right? Limit those drinks like the sugar sweetened beverages that are laden with a lot of sugar, that when our bodies get this excess sugar, the body converts it to fat and it is stored. So you want to avoid all the refined carbohydrates like white bread and white flour and all the white stuff, white sugar and so on, and use those, like I said, that are more wholesome and whole, right? We speak about, the fast foods, the processed foods. You want to cut back on these sort of foods. Additionally, especially for the children, you want to start them with a healthy breakfast. And we know that a lot of our children, they dash out of the door in the morning and they do not take in breakfast. And that in itself, that habit can facilitate weight gain just by starving yourself. And that is a whole set of science behind all of this, can facilitate. So we encourage not just the children, but persons on the whole to have breakfast on a morning, healthy, wholesome breakfast, right? Stay active is another thing that we can do, being physically active. Set up an exercise plan, an exercise regime. So all these are solutions that we can look at, in terms of reversing obesity in our population.
Wonderful. Dr. Isaac, is there anything you'd like to add to that? Something came to my mind while Fabia was speaking, and I know that many people try to incorporate they try to find ways to reduce overweight and obesity. And one of the things, when she spoke about breakfast, one of the things that came to my mind is that intermittent fasting has become quite popular. So many people, when they do it, they tend to skip the breakfast. So that would be part of the fasting period. So if any of you would like to address that, I would appreciate it. If not, then we can just, I guess, leave it hanging. But Dr. Isaac, please go ahead.
Yes, on the intermittent fasting, the thing about the human body, which is why I said earlier, don't just try to starve yourself and expect everything to work out. The way the human body works is we We have existed for so many thousands of years because our organism knows how to survive. And so if you cut down the amount of food that you're taking in, your body will go into survival mode and start to store. So your metabolism will slow down. It will get smart ways to not facilitate the weight loss, which is why you need to sit with your nutritionist, with your medical providers, and get a proper plan. Get an exercise person to help you with your exercises, to be able to do that. Now, intermittent fasting in itself is not bad, but it needs to be done under the guidance of a nutritionist or a doctor, so that they can actually explain to you how to cycle your intermittent fasting to make it beneficial. So now we're starting to talk about complicated carb cycling, energy cycling with intermittent fasting that it's a professional on that. So we're not going to leave it hanging. We would encourage people that you need to speak with your nutritionist.
Yes.
But in terms of overweight and obesity, we looked at the causes of overweight and obesity, and usually when you're treating something, you need to look at the causes. And so with the treatment for overnutrition, which is what in some cases can cause to overweight and obesity, it would be the diet and exercise that Fabia has already touched on. But when we have cases of overweight and obesity, we have people who are morbidly obese, so their BMI is above 40, right? We start looking at the need for medication and even surgical intervention. And so these clients would need to actually, we're not just going to do the surgery and make the stomach small for you and let you go on your merry way. Those clients who have other issues, other reasons, be it medication or biological reasons as to why they are obese, and so diet and exercise does not work, we would start with medication. So there are certain things like the same chemicals your body would create to help you know when to eat and when not to eat, we give in the form of medication for supplements. And before you have surgery, you would need to see your nutritionist, ensure you see your psychologist as well, and help you with the behavioral change to, at least so after the surgery, to have a new lifestyle to help you live post-surgery with your on your weight loss journey. And so these things are available, but they don't stand alone. It is a whole person that you are dealing with. And if let's just say I need to lose 50 pounds, which is not where we are for needing surgery. For 50 pounds, you can do diet and exercise, and maybe some supplementation. So let's use menopause as an example. We have menopausal women, you put on weight during menopause.
Oh, yeah.
And yes, that's the hormones, right?
Yeah.
And so you put on weight during menopause because your body is changing. And so you sit with your nutritionist, you sit with your gynecologist, you get proper training, so you get your exercise schedule. When you've lost those 50 pounds, you can't stop what you did to get back healthy and go back to the old lifestyle. You have to continue on the new lifestyle, the eating the whole foods, avoiding alcohol, going to bed at the same time. Sleep hygiene is extremely important when you're talking about weight loss and weight maintenance, right? And having a regular routine for your exercise. So all of those things that we would do to help us lose the weight, we need to continue to do it when we've gotten to the weight we should be, to be able to maintain the weight loss. The reason for that is because it has been found, for instance, for conditions like cardiovascular disease, heart problems, and blood sugar, so diabetes. When patients lost the weight, they lost the extra weight, control of the condition was much, much better. There is something that I say to my diabetics. If you are diagnosed with diabetes, you are diabetic, but you don't have to die of the complications of diabetes. So the other thing is, I encourage them, once diabetic, always diabetic. Because even though you are diabetic and you control your diet and exercise, you're not taking the medication, You don't need the medication to control the diabetes anymore. But you are at the place where you can actually be controlled on diet and exercise. You are still encouraged to see your doctor regularly, do your labs regularly, and continue to do what help reverse the imbalance in your glucose your glucose levels. So it is not that we're saying that if you lose the weight, you can reverse diabetes and then go back to eating badly and drinking alcohol and going to bed late, right? What is important is we need to realize that what made us overweight and obese, if we can change that and undo it, then maybe the fat organ can start back working properly. And when it's functioning properly, we need to continue to do what we were doing to get it to work properly. So you have to continue to be vigilant with your diet and continue to exercise, continue to see your healthcare team, because the effects of having the right amount of body fat will only last when you have the right amount of body fat. If you put the weight back on, then you're going to have all of the complications coming right back.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Isaac. I think both of you did an excellent job. I really enjoyed the discussion. I learned a thing or two because I personally did not equate joint pain with the excess fat. I thought it was just, weight naturally, whether it's muscle, fat, whatever. If you're really heavy, it will put a lot of pressure on the joints. That is one thing that really stuck out for me during your discussion there, Dr. Isaac, and I hope that all of our listeners listened really carefully. You can replay it, look at the program again, because there's a lot of information that came out from both you and Fabia. And I really appreciate you, the two of you, being here on the program today. Unfortunately, we have to come to an end, but I feel like the discussion could have gone on a little bit longer. So thank you so much for joining us. If you have any final words that you'd like to share with our listeners, please feel free to do so at this point.
My final words would be, if you are querying, you don't know where you fall, if you're overweight, if you're obese, you're not too sure, you've heard all the things that all the roles that fat plays in our health, and you want to know, you just want to check to see if you have too much fat, go to your nearest health center, reach out to the nurse at the clinic, let her know that you want to sit with one of the nutritionists. I know the nutritionists in most of the regions, I know they're eager. They like to have this discussion. They like to show people how to use the plate. So reach out, find out what your status is. The same way we encourage people to check their pressure to know where they are in blood pressure. If it's hypertension, check your blood sugar, do your blood test for your STIs to know your HIV status. Go in and know your adipose tissue status. Find out where you are so that you can make the right decisions, which will affect us now and in the long run and as a country.
Mm-hmm. So for me, my final words would be that you can, set small goals for yourself. It can be overwhelming in terms of weight loss. However, you can set small goals for yourself. That's what I say to my clients. On a daily basis, you set small goals. You cut back on the sugar, maybe in 1 or 2 beverages for the day. You try to eat a fruit or 2 for the day. Cut back on your salt and sodium intake. Cut back on the processed food. So you can start slowly, but at the end, it will redound to big results. So you don't let it overwhelm you, but every day you set yourself some goals, some healthy goals, some healthier habits, healthy lifestyle habits. And before you know it, you will be making good strides in terms of reducing your body fat percent and, gaining more muscle mass. So this is the healthy way to lose the weight. You gain more muscle mass, but you are shedding the fat. Yeah. Okay, because don't forget that a short person and a tall person cannot weigh the same. So as it relates to body mass index, there is a range and a category that you have to fall within. So thank you so very much for listening.
Thank you to both of our wonderful guests this morning. I hope that we will be able to have you join us again. Dr. Isaac, I believe it's the first time you're joining me on the program.
Yes, it is.
You have a standing invitation. Fabia has been here a number of times, and it's always a pleasure to have Fabia on with us, Dr. Isaac. We look forward to having you again. And
Definitely.
Ulan, thank you to you, Rome again. Thank you to all of our listeners. And we hope to see you next week at the same time.
All right. 911, bye.
Casualty 911, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m.